everybody, it's Tanya at the Quilters Market. Thanks for joining us for Seeds of Gratitude Sew Along. I'm now going to turn it over to Andrea.
Welcome back, my quilt friends. So we're ready to finish our quilt. You should have a nice pile of pieced and quilted and trimmed blocks at 9.5-inch squares. My pile's a little small. For the purpose of this video, I'm making a little smaller sample, but you should have a little bigger pile for your lap size quilt. So to start with, you're going to want to lay out your blocks, and if you have a design wall or a big carpeted floor, that's a great place to do it. And you want to rotate them around to make this zigzag pattern with your strips. And this is just to help you know what order to put all these blocks together so that you get the look in your quilt that you want. So I'm starting out with just randomly placing these out here. And then I'll just kind of step back and look and see if there's anything that I want to change. Have the colors spread out a little more. Maybe I have two of the same strips that are meeting up together. And again, this is completely up to you what your look is that you want. If you want the same colors matching up, then that's fine. I'm going to go for more of a mix. And I actually think that looks pretty good. So we'll start putting our blocks together. The way we're going to do that is sew these two blocks together and then add this one in there, and we'll make a row of 3 blocks. Your rows will be quite a bit longer because you're doing a quilt size instead. So I'll start with these two. I'll come back here to my machine and get my pins out. And you want to make sure you're sewing the right edge together. It's easy to get confused. Easy for me to get confused. And then if you're wanting things to really match up, you can see where all of your seams are, and you can just match them up and put a pin in there. And then one at the ends, and do that all the way down your block. Now here's another pro tip for speeding things along. What I would do is I would pin these together, pin these together, pin these together, and then chain stitch it. Then you're getting 3 of them done at one time. So I'll go ahead and do that. Now I've got those 3 rows started pinned together. And again, you're going to do just a 1/4-inch seam along that edge. You may want to do just a 1 or 2 stitch back stitch on these just to hold it a little more securely at the ends. Oh, and another thing is when you're actually putting the blocks and rows together, I would go ahead and drop your stitch length down to a 2.5 just to give it more security also. Once you have one block through, you can just leave it there, lift your presser foot, put the next one in. One trick to chain stitching like this is that it's easy to lose track of what blocks go where. So once you have your layout figured out on the design wall or on a table or the floor, I would snap a picture of it with your cell phone so that you can always refer back to that to make sure you put things back where you wanted them. Because it is easy to get confused about what order you're chain stitching in. Done with that, just snip off your threads, and then you just do a little snip of the threads in between each block. Pull your pins out. Now you've got blocks sewn together. What we want to do with these seam allowances is to actually press them open. That reduces a lot of the bulk with this layer of batting that we have. So I give it just a gentle tug and kind of finger press it with my fingers to make sure I've got it all clear. And then use my iron. Press that open. And I've got 2 blocks of my row done. So I'll just do that with the rest of my blocks. So now we'll go ahead and sew on the next block in each row, and you just work your way like that through all of your rows until you have all your rows put together, and then I'll show you how to put the rows together. So once you've got all your blocks pieced together into rows, we now need to sew our rows together. So when you put these rows together, you can see right here at these intersections, you're gonna have a lot of bulk right there with those 4 layers of batting and material built up. So what we do to help mitigate that is at all of those intersections, we don't need to do the ones out here on the edge, just the ones in the middle, is we want to trim those seam edges at a diagonal just to thin out the bulk. So you don't want to be all the way down because you'll get into your stitches then, but just right above there. And don't do a real sharp angle, do a fairly shallow angle out like this, just to trim off some of that bulk. So you can do that at all of the seam allowances where you're going to have an intersection with all of those extra layers in there. So on this row, I'm going to need to do it at both ends because it's going to be meeting up in both places. So you'll take 2 of your rows and you want to match up the seams. And when you're pinning these, go ahead and pin on each side of that seam to help hold your seam allowances flat so that they get sewn open and don't fold up and get sewn folded over like that, because that'll just create a lot more bulk in your quilt top then. And then again, if you're wanting things to match up, you can go ahead and match up your seams in your blocks. It is very important that your block seams do match exactly, because that is how you're going to attach the backing to this quilt. And then you'll do a 1/4 inch seam along that long edge. And you'll want to back stitch at each end on this also to help make it more secure. Sometimes you might need to stop and lift your presser foot, probably with your needle down, just to make sure that those pile up of seams there are laying flat so that you don't end up with too large of a lump there in your quilt top. So make sure and take your time with this. Don't be in a hurry for the pressing because you want things to be as flat as possible. Usually when you come to this intersection, you kind of have to go back and press those side seams back open again a little bit just to help you get that all as flat as possible. But you can see how trimming those edges at a diagonal helped make that lay a lot flatter. And then for extra measure, you can flip it over. Make sure everything is laying flat here. And then do a pressing on the seams from the front. And this is where you can actually use a little bit of steam to help really set those seams. But don't get too carried away because you don't want to melt your batting. So you can see how this quilt is taking shape. And all the quilting is finished and everything, and all of the lines matching up or not matching up, whatever your aesthetic is. So just continue that technique to put all your rows together, and then we'll come back and put the back on.
Thank you so much for joining us today. We look forward to sewing with you next time. Have a great day.